nonprofits, let's raise more money. Stay tuned as we dive into the captivating world of fundraising auctions with our guest, Jordan Campbell. Discover the incredible path that led him to this meaningful career, hear riveting fundraising stories, and gain expert tips to elevate your next event. Let's get right into it.
Tell us about your routine in the fundraising world, kind of how you get ready to get up for these things and go out and raise a lot of money and stuff like you do.
Yep, straight off the bat, that's a great question. I mean, obviously, there's very different ways to look at it. Obviously, there's the night off where I've got my own routine. I can get into that in a second. Then there's obviously the routine in preparation for the gala or the fundraiser itself. The night off, I normally arrive around an hour, just over an hour before the guests arrive. Mm-hmm. That allows me to get prepared, do the sound check, meet with the AV team, do a quick run through to make sure everything's going well. And I just love to walk the room, get that feel for the room, walk around the stage, notice if there's any visual barriers to my eye line, notice how the seating arrangement is, and just really just feel the room before you get into it and then start to visualize how the night's going to go. I wear a kilt at my events. I'm from Scotland, and in the south in Georgia, that seems to help a lot because everyone's Scotch-Irish on some level.
Yeah, I love it.
Good icebreaker. I'll arrive at the event in my suit, but then get changed into the kilt after I've done the sound check and so on. Go through my notes and then just really start mingling with the guests as they arrive, talking about the live auction items, getting them engaged, tying together the mission and the messaging for the evening so that everyone really feels truly engaged and it resonates with them, the cause, if it doesn't also do so already. But prior to the event, in the 3 months leading up to the event, I have consultations with the clients, with the nonprofits, going through their run of show, making sure it tells a story, because too often runs of show, they are quite stilted and quite stunted throughout the evening. There's no real smoothness to them. So my job is to try and allow a certain segue and a flow to the evening so that not only it talks about the message of the evening, but it really, truly revitalizes the guests because they're spending their hard-earned money on a Friday or a Saturday night at the gala. They got all dressed up for it. And so the idea is to make sure that they have the best time possible because the better time they have, funnily enough, the more they donate. And so as long as
it's definitely a deal.
Yeah,
do you find like whenever you're working with a new client, somebody that you haven't worked before, do you see that, when they get like to the run of show, they kind of take these things as a suggestion and kind of around, well, we want to, and they don't have that. I mean, is that something that you see quite often?
Yeah, I mean, there's the occasion where the nonprofits have the understandable attitude of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. It worked last year. We, did well earning and so on. And so I'll take a look at that and go, okay, well, we can maybe tweak here a little bit, maybe move this speaker's dialogue slightly, make it a little bit shorter. Because again, too often, understandably, speakers on stage, they will go on quite a bit because they've got a lot of messages to get through.
Oh, sure.
But in order to captivate and maintain the audience's attention in the palm of your hand, they should never be speaking for more than 90 seconds to 3 minutes on stage.
Great call.
In each. So yeah, I will try and advise them, obviously gently so, because it's their show at the end of the day. My job is obviously to sort of nudge them in the right direction, giving my whys behind, certain pieces of insight. Why do we have certain styles of descriptions and the fund a need tiers? When you're doing the fund a mission, fund a need, just after the emotional appeal, how do you make that as engaging as possible? Because too often what you find is, $5,000 donation, ladies and gentlemen, that goes towards some research towards a cause. Well, if I donate $5,000 and I go to bed that night feeling happy that I donated, I want to know that I donated and my donation exactly went to X, Y, or Z. So I can say, okay, I helped 10 kids or 10 adults with this, or this, depending on the cause.
Yep. Jordan, so I want to ask. I want to ask a question on that. I want to ask you real specific. Yeah. So because we talk about this a lot, and with a lot of the coaching we do, and talking about that, and having your what somebody's going to get. You're not advocating a restricted gift. What you're advocating is to tie the impact that donation is going to have with something tangible that donor can relate to.
Yeah, absolutely. The word tangible is exactly the word I use with them. Something that they can grasp and get their head around. And so when they're asked by their husbands or wives, when they, there's $5,000 out of their bank account, they can say, well, actually, it was 10 kids I helped there. for that
Exactly.
specific.
That's so good. Yeah, I love that.
Jordan, we
Yeah.
talk about that every day. That's so good. So good. Absolutely. I want to go back actually too, and I hit on a point. I mean, because this is what you're doing day in and day out, but you mentioned 90 seconds for each speaker. Folks get very long-winded on stage. They take poetic license. Jason calls it, the golden hour of fundraising. And we're constantly trying to pound these theories into people's dossier. Keep it brief. You know what I mean? Brevity is actually your friend. Of course, you can still make an emotional connection with folks, even if you are brief. But I mean, speak to that because you're in so many rooms. I know you just keep getting busier and busier and busier in your market because we have dialogue and what have you. But speak to, how you're having that conversation, how important that is right now, it seems like, with folks' attention, how many events they already go to, if there's any fatigue or yada, 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 just how important that brevity really is. Yeah.
Well, you hit the nail on the head, Trevor. I think I read a study sometime, and maybe last year, something along the lines of how our attention span has gone from 9 seconds as humans in the last 50 years to something like 5.
Which is less than a minute. Yeah,
it's probably less than that already. Given the advent of social media and scrolling, and you even see it when you're on Instagram or YouTube or any social media, where if there's a video that's over 90 seconds, most people don't watch it.
No.
Sure.
And it's a shame, but at the same time, it does reflect into the fundraising world. And when they have a speaker on stage, it's quite hard to, short of playing the Oscar music, playing them off the stage early, which would obviously be rude. But
right.
As long as we can impart that idea to the nonprofits that say, look, we love the speakers, we're sure they've got a lot to say, but can you try and allow them to do only 90 seconds to 3 minutes? If they go over, of course, there's nothing you can do. You can't storm the stage, but you would hope that you've done enough prep work prior so that they know to keep it within a certain time frame. And when you're on stage, of course, it's about reading the room and understanding have I still got the audience attention? Are the guests still engaged? And if they're not, change it up a little bit. Change your tone, change your intonation. My style is very much going into the audience and running around a lot. And I use it as my workout sometimes, especially when you've got the big, 1,000-person crowd. So it's invigorating. And if I'm invigorated, then hopefully that translates into the audience.
Yeah, I love
a
that.
Trick. I say a trick. Something one of our clients does. What they started doing is they would video and set up and record the people that were speaking. And that way it was a played recording, which typically these are not professional speakers. There's somebody who wanted it. So it really worked for them. So they could go, oh, can I redo that? And they would get it all. And that way they could control the time. And then the person would just come up and accept the award. It was pretty cool. It was a great way to do it because they'd have like you said, 4 or 5 people. There's somebody going to sit there and want to thank mama. And they're going to want to thank daddy and grandma and grandpa and everybody else and all their friends and everybody at work. And yeah. So,
totally.
being an auctioneer, being an auctioneer myself, and I'm retired. I'm done. I don't did it for 30 years. I'm always intrigued about how somebody got in the auction business. How in the world did you get to be an auctioneer, Jordan?
Where do I start? It's a long story. So I'm originally from Scotland, but I was brought up abroad. I was brought up in Greece. I was brought up in the Middle East. I was brought up in parts of Africa. Just been fortunate enough to live in so many different places. And so I've really got a taste for meeting different people, whether it's different cultures or different people from all walks of life. I used to, prior to moving to Atlanta, Georgia, that was about 3.5, 4 years ago now. I was in Shanghai, China for 13 years.
Oh, wow.
I worked there. I did a lot of auctioneering there and in the UK prior. But it started with, I had an event company in China that looked after staffing and event production for many countries in Asia, from Japan to right down to Australia. Cool. And part of our services was staffing. So we would provide staff to small trade shows right up to big shows. Facebook, when they tried to enter China, they weren't successful, but Uniqlo, the clothing company, Intel, all doing road shows. But then out of the blue, and I had done auctioneering a lot before, out of the blue, I got contacted by Yao Ming, the basketballer from the Houston Rockets.
Yeah.
And obviously, every basketball fan knows who he is, but imagine 1.3 billion people knowing who you are. And his celebrity is insane over in China. Obviously, he walks along the street, his height alone makes him stand out from the pack. But he has a great charity, the Yao Foundation, that helps underprivileged kids in rural areas throughout China. And he teamed up with the Marriott Hotel Group. So I ended up doing a lot of auctions for them, averaging about 1,500 people in the audience. And once you've done it half in Chinese, half in English, then going back to pure English, your confidence is high, because you
Yeah.
don't have to think about
Sure.
doing in Mandarin or anything like that. And so that's how I really more deeply got into it. I did a lot of auctions throughout China. I've auctioneered in Russia, in Moscow, because at university in St. Andrews in Scotland, when I was back in the day, I studied Russian and Spanish. And the idea was that I was in Russia, did a couple of different auctions there, and then in the UK. And that's how I really got into it. So when I moved across to Atlanta, my wife is from Alabama, and I thought, okay, well, I'm going to continue with the auctioneering in Atlanta, bring my wares over here, and hopefully I can bring some new insights from what I've learned in different countries and get in with the Georgian donor scene. And it's gone really, really well. I've been very fortunate to be working.
Yeah, it's a
It's
big
a
one,
big
isn't
one.
it?
Yeah. It's I'm working with a lot of great organizations, and already, I'm going to different states as well, and it's been really, really great. I mean, the audiences here are fantastic. They're very interactive, very friendly, and very generous. So that's how the brief version, Jason, of how I got into it.
Well,
Jay,
good. Well, thank you. I appreciate you sharing.
I didn't know that we were interviewing the world's most interesting man today. That's pretty awesome, Jordan. That's pretty great. You've done benefit auctions in
Because in
Mandarin.
30 years,
So
I've done a
like,
lot of stuff, and I've never done
good.
any. I've never auctioned in Mandarin, and
I love it, brother.
I
That's
couldn't.
fantastic. Yeah,
Yeah, it's
Jason,
awesome.
come out of retirement. We can do it together.
Yeah, I'm out. I'm sorry.
That's good for you, man. I've heard I pay attention to basketball very closely. I've heard great things about Yao Ming as an individual. Yeah.
He's everywhere in China. He's part of the government now.
Wow, that's awesome.
Oh
He's
yeah,
like a real life
he's
Muhammad Ali over there. That's so cool.
So, hey, Jordan, I've got a question, and I think about this a lot, but I want you to just try to set this up. Just from your perspective as the auctioneer, as an auctioneer, somebody who's seen this stuff. Obviously, you help a lot with with the back end getting set up, things like that. What would you say are maybe the top 1, 2, 3 things that you see that just would be there's simple fixes, but so many nonprofits miss? I think one just comes to my mind immediately, but they miss on because they just don't understand how important it is. But just from your perspective, maybe 3 mistakes that you see. Obviously, you're working with nonprofits. You're trying to make sure they avoid that going into it because you want to be as successful as you can. But we all have things that happen. So what are maybe 2 or 3 things that you see that these are things you just got to do, and there's going to help your event, no matter where it is, whether it's in Mandarin or English?
You mentioned you've already thought of one. Obviously, 2 that we've already sort of covered with the run of show, making sure it flows, and the speakers keeping it relatively short, and then the emotional appeal side of things for the funder need. Jason, which area do you see off the bat? And then
it's right when you said sound check. One of the things in my 30 years of doing stuff, people misunderstood how important sound was. And they would go out here and listen to it, and they'd go, oh yeah, it's really loud. There's nobody in the room. And then all of a sudden you drop 300, 400, 500, 600 people in the room, and it's a different deal. And just by by a simple investment of quality sound to do that, which there's lots of companies that do it, and some places have it in house, but that's just one of the things I always remember. I just was militant about it because I was like, I won't do it if you can't get this to this level.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely.
And that's because and I started doing this 30 years ago when I didn't know any better. And they'd say this, I just show up and go, okay, here I am, and then, so I've learned over mistakes, but I just wonder if that's something that's one thing, but there's others.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Spot on with the sound check. There's been occasions in my early days where, I made the mistake of not focusing on the sound. That was when I was starting out and learning. I mean, you learn from your mistakes, but afterwards you can tell that half the audience couldn't hear you. Half the audience could, especially when there's certain venues who have a mezzanine level, and sometimes they employ both of those levels, which is always a mistake, I think, because you have 2 different sets of sounds. But in addition to the sound check, I'd say the registration process. Obviously you can hire that third-party vendor, whether it's One Cause, BidPal, Qtego, whoever it may be, and they're all great. But just making sure the nonprofit realizes the value of that. Realizes the value of if you have a smooth check-in process and a smooth checkout process, then people, it sets the tone as you enter the event, and it sets the tone as you leave the event, and you leave happy. If you're faffing around, as we say in the UK, if you're faffing around trying to register, get your credit cards in, and it's a difficult process, and there's a line in front of you, line behind you, then that's frustrating to guests. So provided that there's no expense spared necessarily, if you can budget it, no expense spared on that registration process to make it smooth, easy, so that people can get to the cocktail hour, get to that mingling section. For me, that's absolutely crucial. Other areas would be to ensure that when people do move through, and traditionally, as you know, a lot of these benefits have the cocktail hour, is how do you get them through to the ballroom, to be seated, or to the buffet, depends if it's sit down or stand up, how to gather their attention in order to do that so you can stay on track and stay on time without being too forceful. So if
Well, it's always funny. You see somebody walking through the deal and they'll go, ding, ding, ding. And then they're just pounding on the little xylophone trying to get everybody's attention. Finally, they go, okay, everybody. And then you got people with, it's kind of like I haven't been to China, but Tokyo, where they've got the white gloves and they're shoving people onto the train. So I think those are really great points. And I think they just get missed because, sometimes they don't have Jordan Campbell who's going to be there to help them. And so when you're listening out there, boy, those are things that are just so important because, you can rock it. Everything goes great. Food was great. Atmosphere was great. We raised a lot of money. And then you get to the checkout and it's a disaster. And that's what everybody remembers. That last memory they have.
Yeah. Exactly. And, in addition to that, there's also something so simple that you would think, but sometimes certain nonprofits are just starting out. And so that's where I can really help them as well, to help them, have those insights, those simple insights, such as, your bid paddle numbers. Too often they'll just put 2 numbers. It'll be bidder 22, bidder 45, and so on. But the melodic nature of having 3 numbers for the chant, as you know, and preaching to the choir here, and in order to have that flow is such a small thing. But also to have the bid paddle numbers, white background, and then having the black digits.
Big, where you're not up there going,
where they had the white background and the black digits, but it was like a soccer jersey font with the numbers. And
the in-house calligrapher.
You couldn't tell between the 3 and the 8. And so some poor guy was probably paying thousands of dollars that he didn't put his paddle up for.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
That's
funny. The
blooper. So this is I got another question. So most expensive item you've ever sold at a charity event?
I've got 2 stories. Stories. One was in China at the Yao's event. I'd just been on stage with Yao Ming, and I've got a picture of him somewhere, I think on my website, high-fiving him. And I was trying to, I'm 6 foot tall, and I still had to jump up and high-five him.
Yeah.
It was nuts. Just a backstory. I'm in the cocktail hour, walking around. Everyone's in tuxedos. Everyone's well dapper and, dressed up to the nines. And there's one guy that approaches me. He's in flip-flops, shorts, and a t-shirt, a Chinese gentleman. And he starts talking to me, and I take the time and I'm talking to him about the live auction items and just assume nothing of it because he's not at the event. Surely he's in flip-flops and shorts and a t-shirt. And anyway, we get to the live auction and we're auctioning off, I think it was a fancy trip to northern China, to Harbin, which is the frozen city at the top of China in the north. Bids are going, and they're quite a money crowd. We got $10,000, $11,000, $12,000, $13,000, $14,000, $15,000. And then from the back of the room, this voice booms and goes, $1 million. Kind of like an Austin Powers moment.
Yeah.
Sorry, it was 1 million yuan, which is equivalent about, it was $1 million that night. And of course, I start laughing. I was like, who's that? And I look through, I'm like looking around, and it's the guy in the shorts and the flip-flops and the t-shirt.
Yeah.
And so that really stuck with me, the fact that, because I approached him afterwards and said, hey, I chatted you, I just didn't expect because you weren't in the tuxedo. He goes, it was because you took the time to talk to me. Yeah. He was a very, very rich man. Yeah. And in China, you don't know who the rich people are because they don't show it off. So it's a difference in culture.
Unless they're in Vegas. Unless they're in the caps table. Exactly.
Right.
Wow, that's awesome.
So it was just astounding to me, and that stuck with me because I remember, okay, it doesn't matter who you talk to, never judge that book by its cover. He bid way above the increment, silly money because he had it, and he said to me afterwards, it's because you took the time to tell me more about this live auction. You really engaged with me.
Yep.
And he didn't expect that, given the fact that the way he was dressed, and he didn't seem to be. So that's the first story. The second, there was one here in Atlanta, and we're auctioning off a barrel of bourbon, Blanton's bourbon. It was really probably worth about $12,000 or $13,000 in value, but the guy just kept bidding, but he was bidding against himself because I found out later he was wanting to get a little tax write-off, which is fair enough. He was selling one of his businesses, and he thought he would use this, and I don't know the whole story, but yeah, it was about $180,000 for something that was worth about $12,000.
Wow.
So you do get these unique stories. It's a lot of fun in the moment when everyone's bidding. There's this rush that you get from the audience, as you guys will know, and it's just incredible, that generosity.
But man, you got a nice barrel of bourbon too, though. That's cool.
Yeah,
Lighten it up,
you
That's awesome.
you just said something, and I think that's really interesting. I don't think a lot of people, when they think about they're going to get an auctioneer, oh yeah, we're going to get Uncle Freddie up there. He's a funny guy, which hopefully nobody's doing that and they're getting a professional. You just said something, about that feeling that you get on stage. Talk a little bit more about that. I don't think people quite understand that unless you've done it, because it's when things are going well and the money's raising, it is a big time
Yeah.
emotional high.
Either of you go running or you play sports?
Big time.
Yeah.
Trevor's a retired professional endurance athlete. He ran professional ultra marathons and
Wow.
triathlons, so he's like super guy. He's Superman.
It was a long time ago.
Now he just rides his
So
bike he gets on his bicycle and rides 100 miles a day. So yeah, don't let him say that.
I've never understood people that can do that. I mean, I'm a big sports fan. I play a lot of football, soccer, and I can run around for 90 minutes without stopping. But if you
Yeah,
ask me to run straight along a road, it would just
yeah,
bore the living daylights out of me.
Yeah.
totally.
So yeah, the runner's high is basically
Yeah,
something that I feel it's the closest thing to that I can feel. Certainly when you manage to find that sweet spot, there is a sort of perfect storm in the audience where the
Mm-hmm.
emotion, the energy, the fun is all hitting at the same time. And I just love to be able to do that. As an auctioneer, a good auctioneer has to really manage that audience and manage that energy in a way. And the high that I get is that feeling that you are running, there's 800 people or 300 people or 1,000 people in the audience, and they're in the palm of your hand in a positive way, because that's what you want to have their engagement. There's no bigger high than that for me. I started public speaking when I was quite young in the high school debate team. I used to work in China before I started my company there. I used to work for Bacardi, looking after their spirits alcohol division, looking after Dewar's whiskey. So I used to have to travel China and Asia, and Russia was one of the countries, wearing a kilt, introducing to VIPs whiskeys, large audience, talking about whiskey in Russian or Chinese, and talking about the processes, talking about how to distill, how to look for the legs or the tears, how to appreciate good Scotch whiskey. And so that really gave me the opportunity to expand, trying new things with the audience, seeing what words work, seeing what intonation works, seeing what articulation of certain words work. And so I think over the years, I would sort of grow on that and learn how you can chase that high. It sounds like a drug addict, but chase that high that you get when you're on stage. Because if you manage to feel that high, then the night is going well. You have the audience. They're engaged with the cause, which is the most important thing. If they can resonate with what they're donating for, then that's gold.
Yeah. And then, as human
Good
beings
stuff.
do, you want to do it again, over and over and over again.
Exactly.
I love it.
Jordan,
That's
how
awesome.
can somebody find you?
Yeah, we want to know how to find you, brother.
Yeah, thank you. A shameless plug here. It's jordan-campbell.net. So jordan-campbell.net, or just Google me, Jordan Campbell Auctioneer. And yeah, you can find me there. Take a look at my website, look at some of the videos. You'll see my style and the action, because every auctioneer is different. Some are
Do you
better
travel?
fit.
Do you try to stick to a certain area, or are you pretty broad to travel?
I'm pretty broad to travel. I say the majority
Yeah.
of my clients right now are in Georgia or in Atlanta,
Right.
because there's so many nonprofits
Oh yeah,
that need
it's
support.
Hotbed.
big
But
time.
I've done Florida. I think I've got an event in LA in November,
Cool.
and so I'm starting to travel a little bit more, depending if my wife lets me. We'll see.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There's
with
a lot
that
going on.
baby, with that newborn
Yeah.
baby.
Hey, I know you're doing great work, Jordan. It's been a pleasure to know you. Can't thank you enough. You're doing a great job. Obviously, you don't need to hear that from us, but I hear the feedback from your clients. Nothing but glowing words about the work that you're doing, and we appreciate it, man. We also appreciate your time. Yeah.
If you're looking for a change up, Jordan's your guy. He really comes in with a fresh perspective, but he understands the foundations of setting up a great fundraiser too. And so I think that's a big deal. There's a lot of guys that just pick up the microphone, show up with a microphone. And I used to be one years ago. Whenever I first started, that's what I did. I just showed up, picked the microphone up, and away we went. They'd say, "Hey, do you want to see
There's a
the
lot
items?"
more to
Nah, I
it.
don't need to see that. That's been 30 years ago when I started. So, now there's a lot more to it. A lot of competition out there, and making sure that you have somebody. So Jordan be a guy for you.
No, I appreciate that, guys. And, with Trevor, thank you we work a lot with you guys at HGA Fundraising. Absolutely brilliant job. Some of your packages are sensational. I think I've got quite a few I'm auctioning off this autumn.
Yep, in the near future.
And
Yep.
Jason, absolutely fantastic to meet you, and love to meet in
sure.
person. We'll have a glass of vino together and talk fundraising.
Great.
Sounds well.
Folks, if
Jordan,
you've got
can't
anything
thank you
out of
enough
this
for your time.
today, if you got anything out of this today, please do us a favor, give us a like, subscribe, but more importantly, share this with other nonprofit professionals that could hear this information. We just want to get it out there for you. So appreciate it.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening. If you love our podcast, click the download button, rate us, and follow us on social media at HGA Fundraising. Get out there, start fundraising, and raise more money. See you next time.